Hey everyone, I'm back again, and today I've got a bit of a topic that sounds a bit rude actually, really, doesn't it? So I want to dive into it with you guys because it may sound a little bit out there with what I'm talking about today, mentioning the P word for prostitution, but I want to talk about psychological prostitution. And the reason why I use this language is actually for a reason, because we don't kind of throw around that word. And when we do speak that word, it usually has its own connotations that kind of, ignite some sort of emotion within people. And so I want to use it to our advantage, because whether you are conscious of it or not, my guess is you're either currently operating in psychological prostitution, or you've definitely done it in the past. It's kind of a level of our development, right? And if you're not currently doing it and you can't see where you have done it, you're probably going to have a circumstance or an environment come into play where it's going to ask you whether you're going to psychologically prostitute yourself. All right, this sounds disgusting, but let me get into it. And really, firstly, I want to start with defining what psychological prostitution even is. And basically, I've made that today's title, which is it's the selling out of one's authenticity for a sense of belongingness. All right, so I'd love to hear from you guys as you're tuning in. Drop me a comment. Let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. If you've got any experience with this, questions, comments, experiences, share them all away. But basically, I kind of started looking into this again, this whole concept of psychological prostitution. I didn't term it that until really after I had an interview with the incredible Kenny Weiss yesterday on his podcast, Heal the Hurt. And we were really diving into, and he held amazing space for me to just share my journey with, kind of exiting this psychological prostitution. And I'm going to dive into what that means and how that shows up in our lives. But I spoke about how I really defined my whole existence and chose the pathways that I did because I was prostituting my authenticity, right? I was selling out my authenticity for a sense of belongingness, all right? And so we all can tend to find ways that we end up in this environment or this strategy. And basically, the first step is always being aware of what we're engaging in and what it's costing us. So if we look at, and most of you guys will be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you're not, it's just a foundational tool that we can use to understand human behavior and what motivates us. So I recommend just doing a Google search if you're not really sure, or I did actually do a free training that you guys can get access to. If you drop me a comment or something, I'll give you the link. But basically, I unpack it and I apply it to how you can use it to grow yourself. And ultimately, it's the pathway for you to access self-esteem and self-transcendence and self-fulfillment. All right, so basically we have some pretty basic needs in life, and we have these kind of physiological needs, the needs of our body for survival and breathing air and drinking water and eating food and having shelter and all that sort of stuff. Then that kind of up levels to our safety needs. So there comes in, that we need finances and an income and a sense of physical and physical safety in our, and our family safety. That's where that kind of comes in. But the area in which we tend to most engage in psychological prostitution is in the needs of our psychology, right? So our psychological needs, which that's really about our social needs. So our love and connection, our belongingness, right? And also in our sense of self, our esteem needs. That's a psychological need as well. So this is the key area in which we prostitute ourselves. Like we can prostitute ourselves at lower levels. And I'm talking about selling our authenticity out in order to get the food, a lot of people with drug addiction going on, their physiological needs, they're stuck at a very low level on their motivation. And basically we can get stuck in that. Most people in our general society are in the psychological realm of wanting connection and belonging, right? And so they want to do whatever they need to do in order to get that sense of belonging from whoever they're surrounded by. And that's why, the journey that I shared with you guys in that interview from Kenny Weiss yesterday was ultimately about my journey of getting out of my psychological prostitution that I was completely unaware of and totally disconnected from myself. So it made it easy to deceive myself into just being whatever anybody else in the external world wanted for me, because that would give me the payoff of that sense of belonging. But I wasn't aware that it was coming at such an expense of my own truth and my own authenticity, right? So at some point, as I started to build higher levels of self-awareness and get a deeper connection with the truth of who I was, or what was even authentic for me, and what do I actually want in my life, basically that awareness allowed me to see what my selling out of my authenticity was actually costing me, right? I now had a sense of a life that could be different if I was to live from the inside out rather than the outside in, all right? And so from that point, it wasn't easy, right? Like that's why most people are terrified of all this stuff we love, right? This personal development stuff, right? They think, oh, it's woo-woo, it's crazy, like, oh, get on with your life, like, what are you going there for, or whatever. And they don't want to see it or confront it or hear it because it's quite threatening to the soul. Well, not really. It's threatening to that weaker part within us that's just wanting to sell out, right? And just let the world decide so we don't have to think and we don't have to go into those dark, scary places and deal with our own insecurities or emotions or traumas, right? And so because they do that, they're unaware, as I was, as to how much of their life they're selling out just to belong, and that is the reason why the number one regret of the dying is I wish I had have had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than one it was expected of me, right? Trying to belong your whole life ends you in a very dark place, a very unfulfilling place, so there's no better time than now to wake up to the areas in which you're selling out your authenticity in order to get a sense of belonging. That can be in your family relationships. That can be in your friendships. Like, who do you think you need to be in order to have a sense of belonging in your friendships? Who do you think you need to be in order to have a sense of belonging in your intimate relationship? Who do you think you need to be in order to get that sense of belonging in your family? And the key here is a willingness to go it alone, in the hope that you can just be free to be all of who you are. All right, and that level of willingness, because it's a scary place to be, because it's a human need for us to have that sense of belonging and connection with other human beings, right? But when you build higher levels of self-awareness, what happens is, that sense of belongingness that you maybe once had that cost you your authenticity, that's no longer a value to you. What's a value to you is being more aware, because you're like, I need to wake up from that life because that life was absolutely costing me and I was totally oblivious and in self-deception. And I know where that path leads because I can learn from the number one regret of the dying plus many other sources. And I have the courage and the confidence to actually go into myself and discover who I am and what I want in my life, instead of going in that realm and being that courageous person, right? That's what you want to get to. Because if you don't, you're going to end up in down a pathway that you don't really want. So you might as well get into discovery mode now and define what it is that you want, who it is that you are, what direction you want to take, what you're inspired by, so that you're no longer prostituting yourself And that level of self-awareness that you have and that level of self-respect that comes with that awareness and your courage to move toward aligning with it, that is ultimately where you up-level all other connections in your life. At that point of self-awareness, when you realize and you own where you've been psychologically prostituting yourself and selling out your authenticity, at that level of awareness and the courage and the confidence that comes from owning that and the level of self-respect and value, that increases, your connection with your authentic self heightens. Now you've just set the bar and the standard for all other connections in your life to up-level to that standard. And you get this level of certainty because you're no longer needing something from the external world to fulfill you because you're doing it for yourself. And so why would you waste time in connections that didn't also offer you that opportunity to be all of who you are? That freedom, and you would want to be surrounding yourself with people who are also courageous enough to go deep within themselves and work their stuff out, right? And deal with their traumas and their shadows and their darkness. Because like I always say, how we treat ourselves is how we ultimately treat others. So you want to ultimately be the kind of person who gives yourself permission to be all of who you are and discover who that is. You're going to attract others who share that same mindset and standard. And that in turn is going to give you the freedom to actually belong from a sense of authenticity rather than psychological prostitution and having to sell out your authenticity purely just for a sense of belonging. All right, so I'm hoping that this serves you guys and resonates with you guys and makes sense for you all. And it just gets you thinking, like, where in my life have I been psychologically prostituting myself? Where have I been selling out what's actually true for me? And at the end of the day, any belonging that we receive as a result of any of that prostitution is costing us any true sense of authentic depth and love. And if we can look at life at the end of the day, that's what we're ultimately aiming for. We want depth, we want love, we want realness. Don't sell anything out on that pathway to experiencing that. And as you guys know, it all starts with developing that within ourselves. All right, so I hope that served you and just kind of been a little bit of a wake-up call. I know it's been a massive one for me in my own life, and it's why I'm super passionate about sharing messages like this, because in my book, there's nothing more important in what I value in life than being all of who I am. Being totally authentic, having the freedom to just chase my dreams and be all of who I am and go deep with people on an authentic level, right? There's nothing more important than that, because doing that allows you to be the kind of person that can contribute at your highest levels as well and give other people the most important gift of freedom to be all of who they are. So, I could talk all day about it, but I hope that how I've shared that for you guys today is resonating and does add some value to your life today. But let me check in, see who's been able to join me. And like I said, drop me some comments, say hi, or drop me any questions or words of wisdom. And let me dive in. I've got Vanessa here and Madeline and Philippe. Awesome. And Hanny, good morning to you. Good to have you. And Colin's here as well, and Philippe. Thanks, Vanessa. Hurt, it's growing if we take the next step. Hurt, it's growing if we take the next step. So yeah, we've got to grow through the hurt, right? Like, a lot of us are so terrified of losing our connection or our sense of belongingness that we engage in psychological prostitution. We're hurting ourselves, more than anybody, when selling out our truth just for that sense of belonging. And you might ask yourself, well, who is it that is belonging in this situation if it's not me, right? Like, it's almost like living a life where you're living in this, this room on a comfy chair, playing the game of life from your seat, but life's out there and you're playing some character, right? It's not even you. And maybe you're generating all this belongingness and connection and whatever, and admiration and whatever. But who are those people connecting with or admiring or appreciating? You know, again, it just reinforces to the self who's locked in that room, not willing to really step out authentically and play life, that they're not good enough or lovable for the truth of who they are. All right. So don't do that to yourself. Believe me, I've done it. It doesn't work. It's not a good pathway, right? It's a pathway you want to steer clear of. So love that, Philippe. And thank you for being here. And Judy's here. And AJ, hello to you. And Ken, much love. And Alps, it's better to be a lonely lion than a popular sheep. Absolutely. Totally. And Alps, if you take the risk of climbing a high mountain, you can only enjoy the beautiful scenery. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And we all know, you know, it's about that journey too. Like that sense of personal progress. You know, that's where our fulfillment comes. And when we climb that mountain and we see how far we've come and we've got that sense of personal progress, we can stand on that mountaintop, enjoy the beautiful scenery like Alps is saying, and also show people the path and have a sense of contribution in a meaningful way, right? So I love that. And Wendy, love this. Need to keep uplifting myself to be the best me, and value myself. This message has made me nervous, which is a sign to me that this live is speaking to me, is raw to my soul. Wendy, I am so grateful to hear that. You know, like I say, you know, and like you probably heard a million times, the only difference between that nervousness and that fear, that terror and excitement for the new possibilities is really just the meaning that you're creating in the moment, right? So like that feeling, you know, like that feeling of like, oh God, like, you know, that is what you want to roll with, but that sense of excitement that it's touching the rawness of your soul to know, hang on, there's some truth here. And I remember the very first time I came across the word prostitution in a more psychological sense, and it was through the work of Caroline Myss, who works with archetypes, and her book, Sacred Contracts, which I read a few years ago, about 3 years ago now. And basically, we all have this need for, one of our archetypes that we play, or our patterns, is the archetype of the prostitute. Like we all do that to survive. But at some time, we need to realize what we're doing and know that survival isn't fulfillment. You know, how can we thrive into our fulfillment, right? And so I know when I discovered this and really I sat with this, oh my gosh, it was ultimately one of the scariest moments that became a really freeing moment for me. So I hope that you have that experience too, Wendy. And when you sit and really ponder the question, where have I been selling out my authenticity? In what relationships, with what people, at what times, in what environments? Like I had a lot of tears shed at that time, you know, and it was a real awakening to take responsibility for how I was going to operate moving forward in my life. So I'm excited for you, Wendy. I love having you here, and I'm really grateful that you take these messages on board and get some value from them. So let me know how you go, and if I can support you in any way, always reach out. So much love for each and every one of you guys. I hope this has served you. As always, my message to each and every one of you is to go out there and live authentically, love deeply, and contribute meaningfully. Okay, that's what life is all about, as I say, and I hope that that deeply resonates with you as well, and you're willing to do the work and dive deep into this one, because it's going to be a valuable one if you do. And I can see Elf has just joined, and anybody else just joining now. I hope you catch the recording, get a ton of value from today's message, because I'm just about to sign off, and I'm sending you guys all of my love. And thanks again for joining me live and contributing to the conversation. And please do share this if it has been of value. Much love.